when you get into coil binding these cars is where the reason you know it's coil bound is, let me pull it down here. Ooh, too far. Okay, right here, your spring deflection. Your shock deflections right now, I don't think that the iRacing shocks are exactly right yet, and that will be more of a thing you'll use when they get the shocks a little bit better with the A car because of where the bump stop is. But right now, the spring deflections are very accurate. And this is my Vegas set. This is my race Vegas set. And this is what is known as a right front coil bound. The reason why it's right front coil bound is that you can tell by the spring deflections, which you've got right here, 4.57 inches is the amount of travel allowed in the front end of the car. With the car setting straight on the ground, just setting straight on the pit road, no arrow, no nothing. Okay? You're already using 3.21 inches of that 457. All right, so 321 from 457 is what, 136? So you've got an inch and a 36 of travel left in that right front spring. Okay, so there's where you find out whether you're going to be coil bound there or the left front first, because you have more travel in your left front here. 295 of 457 is a little over 2 inches, or a little over an inch and what, inch and 1/8, something like that. So 3, that's 1.5 inches, a hair over 1.5 inches of travel. When this has got just a hair over 1.25 inches of travel. So when you go into the corners and the air is pushing down the hood and the weight transfers, that 1.5 inches will coil bind before the left front will coil bind. Everybody with me? Now, you'll notice that my ride heights are not on the bottom. At 566 across the front, across the nose. The reason for that is allowing travel with the splitter. And when you're seeing these ride heights right here, these ride heights are your ride heights on pit road. They're not your ride heights at travel. So whenever you go out, if you've got a car that if your splitter's bottoming out, you're losing the nose, especially at a track like here at Vegas. And if it hits you feel your splitter hitting the ground and you start skating the front end, you start losing the front end, or it starts upsetting the car, you can bring these ride heights up. What that means is that you're not allowing for that 1.25 inches of travel to happen without the splitter hitting the ground. So with that 566, there's enough room. If you ever look at NASCAR on pit road when they're doing that low camera, running down pit road showing you the cars, look at how high their cars are off the ground. That's that ride height right there. And then when you see them showing that picture of them coming down the back straightaway from the nose, and that splitter is just set dead on the pavement, well, that's what happens when they left this much ride height up on pit road, is just the air pushing down on the hood, and then when they go into the corners, when the weight transfers. Okay, and the reason why it's already on the ground and straightaway is because they've allowed that air to push down. And the reason why when it gets to the corner and the weight transfers and it doesn't push down further is because it's coil bound. The spring's not letting it go down any further. There's the trick to getting it speed down the straightaways and handling in the corners, is finding that spot where that front end is just high enough to where your arrow's pushing onto the straightaway, and just enough coil bound, enough travel right here that when you get into the corners, it doesn't upset the car. Now, later on, I won't have to do a lot of driving with this thing. You'll see what this thing drives like, because I'm going to put this as a fixed setup when we do our races later. So all you guys will be able to drive this setup later, and you'll see. Now, the reason why I've got 350 on the right front, 425 on the left front is just pure travel, is to get the car to handle through the center of the corner. Because I use that 425 because it gives me just that much, enough travel to keep the car turning in the center. So that's how you find out whether you're coil bound. Now, if this was a left front coil bound, this travel right here would be lower than this travel right here. That's a left front coil bound. If the spring deflection on the left front has less travel than the spring deflection on the right front, then you've got a left front coil bound. The biggest time you want to work on a set like that are flat tracks. When you get to Milwaukee, New Hampshire, places like that, Phoenix, you'll get closer to a left front coil bound because those flat tracks really want that left front tire to grab it to keep you through the center. Now the higher speed tracks, Vegas and Charlotte, usually I will right front coil bound, but there are times when I will dual coil bound it, which is what this is dual coil bounding is keeping this travel and this travel as close to identical as possible. If I put, say, a 375 in that left front and reset my ride heights back up to a 566, which is close right there. You see where I'm coil bound now? Right front's at a 321 of 457. The left front's at a 335 of 457. If I go into the corners now, this thing will turn around on me because at that rate of speed and that left front coil binding like that, it'll get bad. And I talked to Blake about this. He said the exact same thing in the real car. If that left front coil binds and it grabs, that car's coming around. So that's one thing iRacing's done good. So if I wanted to get it closer to a dual coil bound, put a 400 back in it to give it a little bit more travel, reset my ride height down to about there's a 662. All right, now I'm still back to a 566 on the front ride heights. I'm back to right front coil bound, but I'm closer to a dual coil bound because I'm just barely coil binding the right front before I coil bind the left front. Now I tried this when I was building this setup, and it handled okay through the corners, but if I happen to get off of that center groove and get down into those bumps and let that bump coil bind that thing just a little too hard, it come around on me in 1 and 2. So that's the whole reason I went with that 425, is because it made it safer for me if I screwed up in the center of 1 and 2 around the bumps. It just made it a little bit more comfortable for me. Now, my rear ride heights, you'll notice they're not all the way up. I do that because where the rear ride heights are measured. Anybody know where the rear ride heights are measured? Take a guess. Very good. That is side skirt ride height. It's not spoiler ride height. Always remember that rear ride height is what you're getting side bite from. So the rear ride height is measured from the ground to the side skirt right in front of the rear tire. Now, I talked with Blake about this also with his rear car, and I will test this when I get home, just out of curiosity. But he says in their real car, all that left side of that blade does is cause drag. They don't do anything else. The right side of the blade is the one that gives you the grip, the rear grip. Just as down as it can go. But that right side blade up in the air. Now my question to Blake was, when he told me that, was, okay, well, if you get that right rear blade up in the air, how do you keep the right front down? because the car's a solid piece. How do you twist it? And your answer to me was, Blake,
Not sure.
I don't know. and right after that it followed, dude, I just turned left. So I picked his brain for as far as I could get it. But still, I'm still curious, and I will try this when I get home. I'm gonna try sinking that left rear and bringing that right rear up. The only way of doing it is bringing that right front up too. And I'm thinking that if there is any way of transposing what Blake does in real life to what we do here, would be there's a magic number somewhere that this right rear is somewhere in the neighborhood of a 98 and this left rear may be somewhere in the neighborhood of an 80. I'm thinking that somewhere in these ride heights, there's a number that's going to provide us with a little less drag down the straightaways for speed and a little more grip in the rear, which I will go to extensively long night testing when I get home doing this, just because it'll aggravate me until I do. Now, but other than that, that is where your shocks or your ride heights are measured on that right rear. This is from your front splitter. And remember, always remember, these ride heights are pit road ride heights. They're not on travel, because these ride heights will be different when you're out there on the track. Okay, now with a track, the only time that I'll use a lot of bump, or for Blake, a lot of compression in my front shocks, because usually you lose a little bit of speed because it brings the splitter up a little bit, or it doesn't let the splitter get to the ground as fast. It is on these bumpy tracks like this, like Vegas, Dover, things like that. And what your shock does, it doesn't affect how far your spring travels. It affects how fast your spring travels. So if you've got to where you're getting aggravated, a lot of times I'll use these bumps. If I'm getting to where a 325 front spring is too little and a 350 is too much, and I'm just getting to where I can't find that right feel in between the two, that's what that shock bump's for. You slow that, put that 350 in it, put a little bump in it, it'll slow that down. But it's going to tighten you up. Anything you do at any part of this car is going to affect something at the other part of the car. So anytime you're doing this with that, make sure when you tighten something up, don't automatically go back on the adjustment you just made, because it may be the right adjustment. You just may need to go to another part of the car and adjust for what that adjustment just done. Like adding a little bit of right rear track bar to it to get it back loosened up to where it was, which is always a good thing. The more track bar you can run, the less resistance you've got in the rear tires, the more speed you're going to have. But you got to find that balance between speed and grip. Up until this last build, the casters have been hillbillied. What I mean by that is all the way up on the left front, all the way down on the right front. That's just the fastest way around the track. Evidently, what this new build has done is brought out the caster plate. They fixed the casters. Because you'll notice I've got a 5.4 and a 5.2 here. I've got a little bit more left front caster because I want that left front digging a little more here. Basically, what I have found that the casters do, 90% of it is driver feel. Whatever you got your caster set out, if your steering wheel feels good, how the steering wheel feels in your hand, how heavy it feels, how stiff it feels, or how light it feels, it's 90% of those casters is driver preference. The other 10% is using left front to make the left front tire dig, and right front to make the right front tire turn. So you can make rotation with these casters. You can use that left front to help the left front tire turn. The right front, if it's up above the left front caster, it will help that right front rotate. It's not a drastic change, But when you're looking for that little bit of less or a little bit of more rotation, it's a good thing to go into. Those casters will work. I'm finding that most of my sets that I really start feeling good about, my casters are pretty even. And I like mine in that, just because I like the feel of the steering wheel, I like mine in that low to mid 5 range because it gives me a little heavier wheel, just a little stiffer steering wheel. I like a little bit more feel in it than some. I think Jared runs his at 4s. Matter of fact, I think Jared and Jason both run theirs in the low 4s. It doesn't affect your speed all that much either way. It's not going to affect your handling as such. It's just going to give you a better feel that you like better in your steering wheel. That's the biggest thing about that caster. It's going to give you a little better feel in the steering wheel. All right, we talked about cambers. Rear shocks. I will keep my rear shocks, and I will. My rule on this left rear rebound is it never exists. Left rear rebound doesn't exist because the only thing that thing is going to do is get your butt in trouble coming off the corner. If you come off the corner and you've got left rear rebound in that thing, if you've ever had that trouble of coming off that corner and you got that late flip where the car feels good, car feels good, right when you're getting ready to turn that steering wheel straight, it goes whoops. That's left rear rebound. That's the only thing that thing's good for. Blake, you ever run left rear rebound?
Not much.
There you go. Yep. I have put a 2 in that left rear rebound and have the thing just go nutty. I mean, I just totally despise that left rear rebound. Now, some people may like to run it, but me personally, I totally despise that left rear rebound. I won't use it for nothing. Now, the right rear rebound, that's a different story. 9 times out of 10, I'll start with that right rear shock at a 32-32. Just because it gives me a nice, comfortable entry and a nice, comfortable exit. And then I'll start it there and leave it there, and usually one of the last things I adjust when I'm fine-tuning that car is that right rear rebound. Because if it's just a tick tight, I'll bring some of that rebound out of it. If it's a tick loose, it's somewhere else or in them rear bumps. You can use those rear bumps. Especially these rear bumps right here, think of them as extensions of your rear springs. If you've got, if you're losing a little bit of grip, say you're getting into the run and the grip, as the run goes on, I know a lot of times I have people tell me that when their fuel gets light, it feels like their rear tires are just on ice. All right, well, a lot of that is too much ride height, too big springs, or you can, if your springs are still fine, you can bring these rear bumps down to say a 28 or a 24, and it will slow down that rise of the rear springs. It'll soften up those rear springs, so to speak. And it will give you that little bit more grip that you're looking for later in the run. So don't be afraid to play with those rear bumps. You can use those rear bumps as far as left rear to right rear stagger to give you a little more or a little less rotation. If a 725 right rear spring is too little and a 750 is too much, put that 750 in it, drop that right rear rebound down to a 28. Use that right rear rebound because that's a 25-pound adjustment. These bumps on these rear shocks are one click at a time. So now you're fine-tuning that right rear spring is what you're doing. If it's got a little too much rotation, bring that right rear rebound down some. So you're fine-tuning that rotation off. And everybody knows, everybody's pretty clear what track bars do, right? Left side of the track bar is pretty much entry. Right side is center off. Blake told me something that I wasn't aware of, that 9 times out of 10, their real cars will hillbilly those track bars. Run them higher left side and lower right side, which I understand why. It gives you better entry and more grip off. I don't do it a lot, but it's probably something I'm going to look into a little bit more. The truck arms, are basically the truck arms, as far as what it does for us, is basically grip and speed. I'm finding on the 1.5 miles that the truck arms at the top are giving me a little bit more speed down the straightaways. But you've got to sacrifice a little grip, so I'll use a little lower track bar. You put them on the bottom, you're going to have more rear grip, but it's going to tighten you up, so you'll probably use more track bar or more spring split. Now, one thing that I found out, that I found doing a lot of testing with Daytona, I always make a Q run first at Daytona and then make my race set from my qualifying set. I was almost 1/10 quicker with my truck arms on the bottom at Daytona. Why, I have no idea. And I have no idea. It was just something that I was bored, and I had tweaked everything else in the setup, because you can't do a whole lot, you know, with the rear end at Daytona because of the rules. And I put them on the bottom and was almost 1/10 quicker. Why it's like that at super speedways, but not at the, say, 1.5 miles, I have no idea. Now, the rear truck arm preload. The best way I can describe that rear truck arm preload is how your car reacts to your throttle. The closest to zero that rear truck arm preload is, the more neutral your reaction time to your throttle is going to be. So if you're going, basically what I use this for is if I'm in the corner and when I start getting back on the throttle in the center, and when I get that thing down to the floor and it feels like it wants to turn left, it doesn't want to follow the circumference of the corner. It wants to turn more down toward the white line too quick, then I'll make this a little bit closer to a positive number. A more negative number will make your reaction time when you get on the throttle, it's turning quicker. A more positive number, when you put your foot down on the throttle, it's going to slowly start turning it left. So that you can use for rotation. I use that rear preload for rotation. If I've got too much rotation too quick, I go more towards zero or positive. If I've got too little rotation or too slow, it pushes up toward the wall a little bit, but it's not bad, I'll use a little bit more negative preload to it. And that speeds that reaction time from your right foot to the car actually turning left. And that is, now the whole trick, the whole most difficult part of all this really is the spring deflections, and we can spend some time. Anybody not understand what the spring deflections, how to get to coil bound, how to get, anybody not with me on that? Did I do a decent job of explaining that? And the reason why, and what I'm trying to do is I've got a picture in my head. I've got an image in my head of what this is. And what I'm trying to do is to tell it to y'all to where y'all get that same image in your head. To where you know what, you can tell what coil bind is just by looking at those spring deflections. You can look at just right off the bat, I can look at that and say it's a right front coil bound, because there's less travel in the right front than there is in the left front. And a right front coil bound is probably going to be where you go most times on the B car. I know now Dustin Montgomery. I know most of y'all probably know Dustin, right? You boys good. He'll run a left front coil bound chain link all day long, and run it 1/10 quicker than me. But I get in it, I'll turn it around. I run my right front coil bound, I'll stay with him. So there's no right or wrong answer. It's all in what feels good to you. Now, everybody's seen that the A car doesn't have chain link anymore. It's all solid now, right? So that just made it easier on you, really. The difference on the B car between chain and solid is bumps. I will use a solid 9 times out of 10, but a chain will come in handy, and your negative preload on your top this right here. Now, I rarely use anything but a 2 3/4 inch sway bar because I want that thing stiff. I want that left front planted, which is what that's doing. I try not to run any arm symmetry. Usually my arm symmetry is at none. I try just to use that sway bar. But that arm symmetry, the reason why I'll put it at minimum in a place like Vegas is because of the bumps. Just to keep the front end from, because the less arm symmetry you use, the more you're going to bang that splitter on the ground. So you put a little arm symmetry in it to stiffen it up a little bit to where it don't quite hit the bumps as bad. And I use a solid link. 9 times out of 10 I'll use a solid just because I like the way I can get the car to handle with that negative preload. Now that preload and that front end, the best way I've had to describe that preload is think of it as a winch. If you've got something that is up here and you need to get it down to the floor, but there's something in between it like a big spring that won't let it come to the floor, you can't pull it down, so you've got this winch. You start cranking on that winch and that thing starts coming down to the floor. Okay? Think of that negative preload as that. When you start winching that negative preload, the higher that negative preload goes, the more you've winched down that front splitter. Okay? That negative preload brings that front splitter down to the ground. It seals that front splitter off. Okay? So now the question would be, well, now why not run a negative 200 on your preload? Well, if you run negative 200 on the preload, your splitter's already about an inch below the surface. So you've got to find that magic number. The more negative you go, the tighter the car's going to get. So you've got to loosen it up somewhere else. Remember what I told you, anything you do affects something else you've done. Yep, negative preload, what that does is it sucks your springs down. But that's what that front preload does. And with a chain link, usually with a chain link, I'm going to use that link slack more than I will preload. My preload will be at 0 with a chain link. Okay, then you can use that link slack to decide whether it's loose or tight and how much travel you have. The only thing about that is once you get into a chain link and link slack, then you're using that arm sim. So you'll want to put enough arm symmetry in it so that the chain doesn't allow for all that travel. Because right now, if I put a chain in it and took it out just like it is right now, once I got to turn 1, it would do this number up to the wall. That front end would bounce off the ground. That solid link's what's keeping it from traveling all the way. That chain will make it react a little more independently from left front tire to right front tire. And once it does, it allows more travel, and up the track I go with a chain like this. Now I could make a chain link out of this, but at this track, I'd probably have to put a chain in it, and I'd probably have to run that arm symmetry about a 3. And then I would have to play with the link slack and keep it as close to 0 as possible, close to neutral as possible. 0, no preload in it, no negative preload, no positive preload. And then use that chain link. Now that can come in handy on really bad tracks to keep it good. There's no bad, like I said, there's no wrong answers. You want to come try this thing?
Sure.
Come on up here. I'll show you a guy that does this in real life. And let's see, I've got everything back the way it was. And runs this set. And he can show you what that thing does. And you can see if you watch his hands, watch the way the car reacts.